Oh, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Normal America Show. Rare Monday stream for me now, huh? Your host, Rob Norm. I was thinking, should I start every show up now with like a little acapella singing clip? Wouldn't that be great? Nothing like using my wretched singing voice to drive off anyone at the beginning of the show, right before we jump in. Tonight, this was the lyric that was on my mind. Bother me tomorrow. Today I'll have no sorrow. Looking out my back door. That's the mood I'm in today. Oh, the work stuff just keeps piling up. Bad day after bad day. Kind of inspiring the topic of tonight's show. So we'll talk a little about that. We're going to talk a little about RFK and Pete Hegseth. Probably only be about an hour show this evening. So apologize for the short show, but a couple topics to hit on. By no means do I think these are the most important topics going out there right now. We'll also talk about a little personal drama stuff. Is this the Fortnite World Cup? You got it, man. I'm getting prepared. Get my fingers loosened up. I'm ready to build some forts and get some cool skins and whatever else you do in Fortnite. I can't keep up with it. I see clips of. I've never played Fortnite even once. I see clips of it, and like I've played Call of Duty online and other stuff that I'm terrible at, and I've even played like PUBG. So I'm familiar with the battle royale genre, right? But Fortnite, like you watch it and it's just like they'll have these goofy looking guns, and then all of a sudden they're just like building walls, like up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And it looks like they're doing it really fast. And I could just see myself playing that, like, all right, which button do I hit? I want to build a wall here. It's all I could do to like move around, shoot, reload. That's it. That's about what I bring to the table with a game. So if you're here for Fortnite coverage, probably not the best. I'm an old man. I can't keep up with that game. Also, I think I'm watching the clips I see are probably the best players. So maybe an average player is not as fast. But when I'm watching it, I can't even make sense of it. PUBG I've played on the phone, but I think on it, I'm probably playing with bots that suck because I do pretty good. I'm sure if I ever played with people that were decent, I would get crushed. But I've only ever played it 3 or 4 times. Anyways, it was a fantastic weekend. My Easter weekend was great. I got this hat from the Easter Bunny. My son was pleased with. And the old Pittsburgh Pirates. Their season's over already, as always, come end of April. Um, but they're my team. And now it was overall a good weekend. I'm becoming Catholic. I'm non-denominational Christian at this point, but I'm going to become a Catholic. My son's going to the school that my wife went to growing up, which is a Catholic school. His class size will be like 6 to 8 people. I'm excited. I think it'll be better than public school, and so I've committed to starting to go to church. Um, so, news of the Pope passing away. Look, I don't particularly like it when anyone dies, barring few exceptions of people that are like, serial killers and those sorts of people. Political figures, even those that are, in my eyes, not good. Um, I try to reserve judgment on the day of their death or in the time of their mourning, but mileage may vary. I don't care if other people, if George W. Bush dies and you thought he was a warmonger, have at her, I guess. If you think Nelson Mandela is terrible and he dies, have at her, whatever. But personally, all I'll say, wasn't a big fan of the politics of the Pope or sort of what I foresaw his agenda to be. Having said that, certainly any family that he has or those that looked up to him, um, maybe a difficult time. So heart goes out to them. Uh, just weird. How many popes have I lived through in my lifetime? I don't know, 3 that I could recall as an adult, probably 5 in total in my 40 years, but I don't know. Anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about. I thought we'd talk a little about RFK, Pete Hegseth, and then I see my friend Sparky's on here. We'll talk a little about the conversation I was having with him, with our good friend Pisco, and the going on of him. Let's start with since we only have an hour, let's jump right in with the Pete Hegseth commentary, right? So you remember Signalgate. Now we have like Signalgate 2.0. So I hope my editor Black Elk clips this. Here we go. Signalgate 2.0. All right, here's my thoughts on this. I don't care. Keep Hegseth. Next. All right, now let's jump in to RFK and talking about him, because I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is it does have to do a little with my line of work, which I'll talk about. So this won't particularly be the most politics-oriented segment ever. It's going to have to do more with just feelings I have about autism in general. But it was something that was in the news, and it's rare that one of these subjects that I talk about that my wife's very interested in. My wife part of the reason I started this show nigh on years ago was because my wife got tired of hearing me ramble about politics. So she's like, why don't you go ramble on video and then let me alone? So we don't talk a lot, but this was a topic that she was interested in. So RFK gives a speech where he's talking about autism. And part of the speech that went viral was he was talking about certain people with autism where he said, these people will never pay taxes. They'll never drive a car. They'll face challenges their whole life. And we owe it to them sort of to find the cause of this and any potential treatments. And the reaction to this was predictable in today's political landscape, but still sad, in my opinion. So many Trump haters and RFK haters just were like, how dare RFK say this? How dare he? I know someone with autism and they can work and they could drive a car. Okay. There was one particular gentleman from, I forget his name. I'm not even going to bother to look it up, but over the weekend, I responded to on X, who was a Michigan sports writer. And he put up a picture of his son, who's apparently autistic, who plays the piano quite well, and was like, how dare you? My son's fantastic. Autism's not something to be treated. It's a blessing, basically. Okay. So I thought we'd talk about this. Like I said, maybe not the usual. No, there's certainly a political spin to this, because a lot of this is just people that politically hate Trump and hate everyone in his administration, and they're going to view things in the least charitable interpretation as possible. And then use that to, oh, what a monster. But most of it has to do with sort of people wanting to make things about themselves when it's not necessarily about them. Um, so I'm gonna say some things tonight that are gonna be controversial. Um, and a lot of people might not like, but I don't care. All I can do is give my honest opinion. Now, as a precursor, for those that have followed me for a while, you know I work with adults with developmental disabilities. Autism is quite a frequent diagnosis of the people I work with. Other words that you hear are words such as mental retardation, intermittent explosive disorder. There ranges a gambit of diagnosis for people that, depending on which doctor is diagnosed, are interchangeable words that basically just mean things that cause a different development and lead to different sort of challenges in life. The way autism was always explained to me was this spectrum sort of thing, right? And there was a doctor that I talked with when I got into this line of work who we'll talk a little about him further into the show. I mentioned this the other day, but he's a very impressive guy at first look, and he's still an impressive guy. He's smart, but I think that he has some toxic beliefs on autism. Nonetheless, this is the first time I sat down and talked to a doctor about autism. I was in this presentation that this doctor was doing, and this is how he explained it to the audience. Have you ever heard a song that for some reason, the moment you heard it sticks with you, right? And so then years later, you could be driving down the road with the radio on and you hear that song. And all of a sudden, it's not just that you remember that song, but you remember that exact time and place and the feeling you had when you heard that song that one time. Maybe it was the first time, or maybe it was you were having a very bad day and you heard that song, or a very good day, or whatever. But in that moment that you hear that song, you're sort of almost physically transported to a time and place where you had heard that song previously. That's autism. That's the way he explained it to me. That it's about wires getting crossed in the senses that we use to experience life: sight, sound, taste, touch. Wires getting crossed. And all of a sudden, things that we see as those senses are being rewired in our brain in a way that's abnormal to trigger some other feeling. Now, I don't know if that's a standard definition of autism or not, but I like that because to me, I, who genuinely wanted some connection for the autistic people that I took care of, that was partially how I was like, oh, I get it. So why is it when you're working with someone with not, and everyone was different that I worked with, but like some people I work with autism, loud noises just drove them crazy. Why? Well, imagine that the sense of hearing that they have is just different. You hear a car horn, they hear nails on a chalkboard. And so it's like, okay, I could kind of get that. So what would that be like? What if in life, every time you heard a loud noise, it like physically harmed you? It's like, or it transported you to a place of horrible physical illness or physical pain or mental anguish. And then, like, in that sense, I'd be like, okay, I get it. So that's why certain things trigger differently than they would, you know. Again, I'm not saying this is the correct way to look at it or not, right? I'm just saying this is the way this doctor who specialized in autism, this was sort of how he was explaining it to this crowd of us. And then the next thing, and this is maybe, I don't know, as someone who ran for Congress, maybe this is something that I shouldn't say, but I don't care. There were certain substances that I have taken in my life. We'll try not to run afoul of terms of service, but those substances might make you see things that weren't really there. Maybe you could taste a color. Maybe you could physically see sound. And so I always thought taking that stuff at one point in my life when I was younger, it was like, oh, I felt that sensation. I felt what it's like to have my wires crossed. Not in a serious way, not in a life-altering way, you know, but I had just a little touch in a small time frame in my life. What would it be like if your senses got crossed up? Uh, So for me, I always thought of that as a positive experience because it was like, yeah, I sort of in the slightest way understand it, right? But anyways, that's the way that it was explained to me. So I had no problem with this autism as a spectrum sort of conversation that we've had nationally. And that's sort of how we viewed the diagnosis now. Maybe not everyone looks at it that way, but basically the idea that this particular doctor was trying to say is we all have autism. That was his point. All of us have autism. It's just how much. You have just a little teensy weensy, or are you full blown, like where you need 24/7 care? So I think there's a problem with that view of things, as we'll get into. But to speak on this doctor a little more, and then we'll bring it back to RFK, he illustrates to me what a lot of this problem of how dare RFK say that he's talking about people with autism that can't drive and can't pay taxes because my son or I have autism or my wife has autism and they can do all those great things, and autism makes them special, and it's not something to treat, it's not something that's bad. This particular doctor, and I think I've told this story before, he believed that autism was closeness to God. And so he envisioned that if you, the human being, were to have a conversation with God, your physical body could not handle it. You would, I mean, I don't know I can't remember exactly how this was explained to me, but like, I just remember thinking like you would just disintegrate. You could not handle that awe of being in the presence of literal presence of God in your human body. And so what autism was to him was in the womb when your spirit was being formed. The spirits with significant autism were just those that were closer to God. And so when we're dealing with autistic people in my line of work that would do things like were nonverbal, had permanent tics or like almost like seizures, or you know, I don't want to get grotesque, but things like fecal smears, where you would, you know, grab feces and rub them on yourselves and rub them on the wall and stuff. To him, that was closeness to God. And I could not disagree more. That is not something to celebrate. That is not something to praise. That is not something to look upon with admiration. Those are significant life challenges. Though, and it matters in how you look at this. Now, there's an appeal if you're a parent and you're dealing with a child that is that significantly impaired with autism. The appeal of, oh, it's not that your child has a problem, it's that they're close to God. It must be intoxicating. And thank God I've never dealt with that in my personal life. I could tell you stories of families, and it's incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. No doubt any parent, any human being worth their salt will love any child and want to do anything for their children. But the time, the energy, the financial resources that are necessary to give people treatment with really dire, significant cases of autism, it could be very draining. And I've seen it drain families. I've seen husbands and wives split up. I've seen parents incapable of being around their children anymore. It's sad. It really is. Brock Van Wagner, thank you so much for the $10. Says, if you want a good book about infantile autism, Let Me Hear Your Voice is a good one. It's about a family where 2 of their 3 children got diagnosed. It's all about what they did to treat it. Man, it sounds interesting. And so I understand that if you were in that position and you're putting so much resources into helping your children, and along comes this idea that it's like, listen, it's not that your children have a problem. It's that you have the problem. You're further away from God. All the other children are further away from God. Your children are closer to God. I see the appeal in that. And you might say, well, what's the harm in that? Well, sort of nothing at first glance. But then you might say, like, well, what do we do to help those people? What do we do to treat them? Treat them for what? Closeness to God? What's there to be treated? How dare you? How dare you say my child needs treated? This is a good thing. So I always rejected that. And I had other questions too. It's just some dumb redneck. I wasn't a professional in the field. I jump into the field within 3 months of being there. This is what I'm hearing. And I could tell you stories that'll blow your mind. The first gentleman I worked with had some remarkable challenges. He was the strongest human being I ever met. He had seizures all the time. He was very limited verbal and very, very violent. Very violent. And I felt bad. I'm not saying this to disparage that guy. At one point, the reason that I stuck with this line of work was I found myself quickly in a spot where I realized I was an alcoholic. I have no, I'm not going to mince words about it. I went from being a debate coach. State didn't pass a budget one day. Okay. Like 3 days later, I'm in training to become a direct support professional, a DSP, basically someone who works with people with autism and other developmental disabilities. And I didn't feel as qualified at all. I've since learned that 90% of the people in this line of work are less qualified than me, which is scary. The qualifications, though, aren't like you need a master's degree. You had to go to school for so many years. The qualifications that you literally have to have are like you have to have a driver's license. You have to pass a state background check. That's about it. For me, the qualifications I want is you have to be caring. You have to be understanding. You can't be quick to fly off the handle. You're going to be tested emotionally, psychologically, and physically many times, and you can't retaliate. You have to be the type of person that could be given authority, even if it's just one-on-one authority with a person with a disability, and you can't abuse that. You have to be willing to be a decent person even when no one's watching, because most of your job, no one will be watching. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of people don't meet those criteria. A lot of people, given even the smallest modicum of authority, abuse it. A lot of people, and this isn't, I'm not even saying this is a detriment, like as an insult to people. A lot of people, they can't put up with, dude, you're going to sit there and call me names. You're going to repeat yourself 100 times. You're going to slap me in the face. And you think I'm not going to retaliate? No, thank you. And there's nothing wrong with you if you're that type of person. It's perfectly fine. It's just not the right line of work for you. That's all. But no hard feelings. I don't, until you are in the situation, I don't know how you would know, what type of person you would be in that. But I found myself at one point with this person that I worked with that had a lot of problems and was really strong and put me in the hospital several times. I quickly found myself, I remember one day, it's one of the like top 10 days of my life where I remember that stuck with me, that will always stick with me. I was, well, shoot, I guess I'll just tell a shortened version of the whole story. This particular person was placed in a hospital in what we call 302. So forcibly put in a psychiatric institution. That psychiatric institution, within an hour of receiving this person, contacted me as the contact person and said, we can't handle this person. They're too violent. But the law said they had to handle them for at least 24 hours. So 24 hours later, I had to go pick this person up. It was about an hour and 40-minute drive back to the home, most of it on interstate. As we were changing from one interstate to another, we had an incident where windows got smashed out of the company van that I was driving, and it became very unsafe. There's glass all through the van, outside the van. I had to pull over. Police get involved. Police wanted to arrest me because this is a person in their eyes that should not be in the public. So why would I pick them up? At this point in my career, I was making like $10.50 an hour. And I'm trying to explain to the cops, like, man, I'm a nobody. I'm nobody. I get paid like $10 an hour. I was sent here by my boss. What was I supposed to do? And ended up getting taken to the nearest emergency room. At which point there was a nice woman from the county. It's called a sports coordinator that showed up, and she was trying to facilitate medical treatment for the gentleman I was working with. The doctors at this particular hospital freaked out, was cursing and swearing at me and this young woman because they knew the reputation of my client, refused to take him. This client was basically handcuffed for hours. I ended up spending about 30 something hours in the emergency room with this client, as every doctor, nurse, police officer, people at my company, everyone just wanted to kick this guy down the road. Just kick the can. Let him be someone else's problem. And I remember walking outside. I don't smoke. I was never a smoker, but I walked outside and felt like a cigarette for one of the only times in my life. And I sat in this bench, and it's like 2 a.m. I remember it was a very clear night, and I just looked up at the sky, and I realized I was the only person in the world remotely that gave a shit about this guy. Like, no one else in the world. No one. And who am I? I'm some redneck drunk. That's it. I'm doing this job temporarily because the state budget didn't pass, and I'm just waiting for the budget to pass, and then maybe I'll get called back and be a debate coach again. And I'm waiting to get home so I could probably go to the bar and drink my face off with my friends again, like I did every night. Didn't have a girlfriend, wasn't thinking about getting married, having kids. I just was happy being a drunk. And I didn't want people to have to depend on me. I like being my own thing. And there I was, me, with all these professionals, law enforcement and state officials and doctors and nurses, and no one gave a shit. No one. And I just remember thinking, like, how tragic. What a horrible, horrible thing for a person to go through. To not have anyone, not one person. Just me, some drunk me. And it was really a really shitty moment, to be honest. And unfortunately, that's sort of where I'm at in my career now as well, where I feel like professionals are letting down a person that I deeply care about, and there's nothing I could do. I'm just low man on the totem pole. Anyways, not to get too into that. That's was sort of when I realized, like, well, I had questions with the treatment of this stuff, where it was like, well, what are we doing? Like, what this whole, well, it's a spectrum, and and I started to say things that were really upsetting the people in my company. Like, once that individual got to come back to our company and got to the way I've always worked in the companies I've worked in, the way it works is you basically have a house that the company buys or rents or whatever, and then they tailor it to the particular client that will be in that house. And it's the client's home. So even though the client's not paying rent or they don't own the house, it's their home for intensive purposes. They live there, and we as staff come into that home, usually on a 24/7 basis, and we work with them. And so a lot of things the clients would have control over. For example, if the client wants furniture that's a certain color, try to get a furniture that's color, if those sorts of things. But it's the client's decision, it's their home. We try to maximize personal freedom of the people within their rights and within sort of obviously budgetary constraints. Like if they want a Rolls Royce, we're probably not getting that, but you get the point. That's sort of the idea behind it. There was a lot of violence that would occur in that house, and we one day had to come up with a list, and the list would say it was why are people being attacked by this client? So as the team member that had spent the most time with this client, I sit in this meeting, and it's the aforementioned doctor that I was telling you about that thinks autism is being close to God. By the way, this doctor was diagnosed with Asperger's. So just to give you a clue. And they started coming up with this list, and it was like, number one on the list of things that triggered my client to get him to attack you: beards. I happen to have a long beard at the time. Okay. Heavy set guys. Okay. And then it was like, we had like 3 pages by the end of this. And you started to read through the list, and it would say things like this. It would say, people with short sleeves. And then 7 down the list, it was people with long sleeves, people that wear hats. And then 2 pages later, people that don't wear hats. Men. And then 3 pages later, women. And finally, I was like, what are we doing? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, this is becoming laughable. And they're like, well, how so? And I'm like, because we're literally listing everything. What good is a list of triggers if the trigger is everything? Like, what is the therapeutic purpose of this? Oh, make sure when you come in the house, you're not wearing a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt or a tank top or no shirt. What am I wearing then? A suit until I get hit with the suit on and then we can check that off the list? It didn't make sense to me. And, I was like, I think that there's maybe something else going on here. And so we started talking about what they could be. And the next thing I said infuriated them. And I was like, maybe he's an angry person. And they couldn't believe that. How could you say that? And my rationale was, I know angry, mean people that don't have autism. So why would it be impossible for someone to be angry or in pain or mean that does have autism? Right? That's my thinking of it. Of course, there are unique challenges that come with significant mental diagnosis. Of course. But is it really so alien to us that we just say, well, it can't be that they're just in pain or they're just mean? It can't be that. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying that I was right, but for me, as just a regular guy that's trying as best as possible to treat everyone as normal as possible, why is that out of the question? Why is it offensive? And of course, it was offensive and people got upset at me. Okay. And then, I've told this story before. The way I left that company under dubious circumstances, I won't get into it. But I had friends that still work there. And unfortunately, that gentleman was put into one of the psychiatric facilities that's big here in Pennsylvania, which has since closed down. But it was a famous one. It was called Polk that Nancy Reagan toured. And she was sort of appalled by the conditions in the 80s. The word is, I don't know if there's truth to this, but the story that you hear is they would bury people out back, but only like 3 feet deep. And then in that particular town, there was a flood one year and bodies started washing up. I don't know if that's true or not, but apparently the treatment in these facilities of people was not what many would consider humane. And so they started to take down facilities. Like Polk was one of the ones with national recognition. And I'm sure everyone hears this sort of, we need to build back the mental facilities. Well, because the mental facilities, a lot of them went by the wayside. This particular gentleman I worked with after I left the company, well, before I left the company, actually got moved to that facility. And I'll tell you another story too. I went there again. You have to remember, I'm just some low-level guy. I've been working for about a year at this point with this guy, but at this point, I'm the closest human connection he has. So when he got sent to that facility, who was one of the only people that they took in that decade to that facility, they were winding down. So they're moving people out of the facility. They're not taking anyone, but they took him because it was a unique, challenging case. And so they made me go up and talk to all of these people. And I'm sitting in the room with all these people with like doctor's coats on. It's this big conference room, big wooden table. And there's me. And there's like the owner of my company who's like barely saying anything. And then there's all these medical professionals and doctors and administrators from this hospital. And they're asking me all these questions. Why doesn't he brush his teeth more? I'm like, I don't know. He's very violent. When we try to help him brush his teeth, oftentimes we get physically struck. So we sort of thought that there were other challenging health situations that were more important to look at. And that just seemed to be a battle that we weren't fighting. Oh, he'll brush his teeth every night here. Great. And at one point, I remember that everything I said, they were just like I was this big failure. And in many cases, they're right. I was a big failure. I'm not trained for this. I'm making $10 an hour and I'm fighting not to get killed. I've been put in the hospital multiple times by this person. I've seen crazy stuff, and they say to me, they're like, well, here's the goal. You're going to come visit every Wednesday, and you're going to be amazed. Within a week, he'll be in general population, taking advantage of our facilities like swimming and out in the sort of yard. We have activities like badminton and stuff. He'll be doing all of that. It'll be great. I say, great. That sounds amazing. The next Wednesday, I drive to the facility. I'm like, hey, I'm Rob Norm here to see so-and-so. I was wondering if I could check in, go see his room. Oh, he's not allowed to have visitors. Apparently, the utopian dream that they were talking about, that I was such a failure, did not go so well. And that was it. That was the last time I ever saw that gentleman. For the rest of my time at that company, he was not allowed to have visitors because it was considered dangerous. I I left that company, and a couple years after that, one of my friends that was now in the office of that company called me and said, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, not much, man. How's it been? And he goes, that person that you took care of, supported, he passed away. And he doesn't have any family. And so no one's going to be at the funeral. And even though he's no longer with this company, we suggested, seeing as how he was the last company we were with, that we go send someone to represent. And I thought about me and you could go. And I said, yeah, absolutely, man. Let me know what day the service is. I'd be more than happy, because everyone should have someone at their funeral. And when I left that company, I had words with sort of the owner of it. And to this day, one of the most petty, angry, just makes me livid is 3 days later, I called that guy and was like, so when's the time? Like, I cleared my weekend. When is it? And that guy says, oh, I talked to the owner and she said that you couldn't go. And so we didn't send anyone. So my guy that counted on me, that I worked with for a year, that no one cared about, died alone with no one at the service, to my everlasting shame. That's what happened to that guy. And so I have not, I've been lucky that I haven't had a brother or a sister or a child with severe autism, but I have deeply cared about people with severe, and that's just one client. There's been many, 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 many clients that I've worked with, and I've deeply cared about them. And this notion of, we have to be hippies that are like, oh, there's nothing to be treated here, and it's all normal, and that's garbage. Now, the other side of the spectrum could go way too far as well. And I understand the hippie side, what they're fighting against, which is these people are garbage. They're so medically infirmed. They'll never benefit society. Put them in a facility somewhere and lock the door. I don't think that's the right answer either. I think the right answer lies somewhere in between. You have to be realistic. You can't give people freedom that harms themselves and others in the community. If you have a person that has such a severe autism diagnosis that they're lashing out in violence, you can't do what that company was telling me to do with a person like that and take them to the local Dairy Queen. Take them to the local playground. You can't do that, because when shit gets hairy and they start attacking members of the public, you're in a bad position. Corey Barton, thanks so much. $2. The Big Soda Weekly Allowance. Thank you. I'll take it. Ian Mouse Chung, thanks you. But at the same time, I don't think the answer is just like, oh, you have really bad autism, throw them in prison. We also can't spend trillions of dollars on small handfuls of people. We can't do it. Would I like it if I got paid $70 an hour instead of 20? Yeah, I would love it. But should the government foot that bill? Would I love it if, some of the people I work with, like going to movies or going fishing or going to amusement parks, would I love it if we could charter a boat or have month-long vacations to Universal Studios? Sure. The people I work with would love that, but who's footing that bill? Thanks, chat, for the $10. I appreciate it. And Ben, thanks for the $5. Says, we love you, bro. Thanks for helping those kinds of people. Thank you, man. It's my pleasure. I love it. So I'm not sitting here saying like, oh my goodness, you have to have a big heart and, everybody must pay more and more. I get it. Like, there's only a limited amount of funds and limited things you could do. But to me, the answer is somewhere more in the middle. And it's probably part of me, because of my bias and being close to it, that is the most irrational part of me. Whereas I'm very small government oriented in many things, but I could be talked into more services for people like this just because I've dealt with it, because I've seen it. I could also tell you how much of the money that's put in these services is wastefully spent, in my opinion. So as always, like with education, it's not necessarily an amount of throwing more money at the problem, but it's making sure the money that's being used is being implemented correctly. But I digress. Anyways, this brings us back to RFK. Now, I don't think that the people that are arguing against RFK are making this position that it's like, oh, autism's close to godliness. But a lot of the people that are criticizing RFK by saying, well, I have a family member with autism. How dare he imply everyone with autism is nonverbal and can't drive and can't pay taxes? I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. Now, you might disagree on what he thinks are potential causes of autism, and you might disagree on what you think potential treatments of autism would be. But as far as the fundamental criticism of, well, when RFK says that people with autism will never drive and not pay taxes, that's insulting to my loved one with autism. I think that that's a very, very uncharitable and, might I say, quite frankly, dumb way to evaluate that. Because what's the implication here? Like it or hate it, what we use for the word autism could mean almost anything at this point. When most people, I saw someone say this earlier in the chat, they said, I think when people hear the word autism, they just think like nerdy or quirky. Yeah. Yeah, that's how a lot of people look at it. Elon Musk is autistic. Oh, it's someone hyper-focused on little quirky things and not very sociable. When I hear the word autism, the first thing that comes to my mind is that guy I just told you about. Nonverbal, fecal smears, tremors. That's what I think of when I hear autism. Now, I also know that it's a large spectrum, the way people use that word. But I'm afraid that what's happening is the overuse of the term, and I don't even want to say overuse. I don't care. I'm not here to police language. But because of what we as a society have accepted as what we think of when we hear the word autism, oftentimes the people that require 24-hour care, like the ones that I'm dealing with on a daily basis, they get lost in the shuffle. Oh, you deal with autistic people like Elon Musk? No, not like Elon Musk. Steve McFeed says, Rob, you can't cure a difference in brain structure. It's like saying you can find a cure for Down syndrome. It's retarded, quite frankly. Well, first off, you don't know that. The word cure is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. You could do things like lower the symptoms that come with a change in brain structure. You could do things that maybe incrementally recover some brain structure. For example, I'm no expert on this, but haven't there been studies that you could recover brain tissue in certain ways? You could find out if things are more likely to cause autism and then correct those things before. No, that's what I'm saying. You don't know that you can't change some things with brain structure. You don't know. And I'm not impressed by established science. Want to go back and talk about the pandemic with established science? Or how about ADHD? Or how about the established science on men could be women and vice versa? I will argue with scientists when I feel like it's need. You go ahead and just listen to them. How's your lockdown coming? You still wearing your mask? Remember, being a Trump supporter or going to work, you can spread the pandemic, but not if you're fighting racism. And if you don't like that, trust the science. COVID, so autism is fake. F you, man. Yeah, can you quote me saying autism is fake? Can you show me that? What I'm saying is just how dare anyone ever talk about treating autism? That's stupid. It's impossible. Seems to be a short-sighted view of things. Who said I said you could just cure it? Where am I saying anything? Where did I say you could just cure autism? Where did I say autism was fake? What an asshole you would look like if 20 years from now they're like, wow, we've done this new tissue regenerative study that shows through certain applications of electrodes and certain medications, we can regenerate brain tissue. And it's able to restore some of the worst functions we see with chronic cases of autism. What an a-hole you would sound like then, wouldn't you? You would say, that's impossible. The science said that's not possible. That's what it said. This must be a lie. Shut it down. Nonetheless, not to spend the rest of my show arguing with Sneed McFeed that knows that we should just, if he's going to say, I said autism is fake, I said we could just cure it, then I guess I'll be as charitable as him. Okay, Sneed McFeed said we should just throw everyone with severe autism in the garbage. That's what he says. Don't worry about ever offering any sorts of treatment or comfort for them. He says it's impossible. To hell with all of those people. Great. Thank you, Sneed McFeed. Your opinion means jack shit to me. But the idea that somehow RFK should be, and by the way, I even started this segment by saying, if your argument with him is you think that his claims about diagnosis and causes of autism are erroneous, fine. If your argument is you think that he's incorrect on possible treatments of autism, fine. But the criticism of how dare he talk about how difficult people with autism have life, my son doesn't. Then what's the solution to that? Okay, then I guess we just all have to pretend when we say autism that we can't address those people with severe cases with significant challenges in life, because we don't want to offend anyone who has a kid that can play Mozart. We don't want to offend them. So how exactly do we have this conversation then? See, McFeed, okay, Sneed says the criticism is not over saying, how dare he say that? My kid's really talented. That's not what the criticism. That's what Sneed McFeed says. Ready? Okay, let's see when I said I was responding. Trevor McHugh says, this is my son. He has autism. He's teaching himself piano and learns songs by ear. He taught himself to read at 2 years old. He's in the 94th percentile for math. There's challenges, but he's the best thing in my life. There's nothing wrong with him. Fuck you, RFK. Sneed McFeed. Then you see, I say, this is insanity is one of the absolute dumbest responses I see to RFK's comments. I've worked with folks for autism for nearly 18 years. Some are incredibly high functioning. Some face challenges so severe it requires 24/7 care, oftentimes by model people. Getting offended that someone like RFK discusses the challenges of the latter by taking it as an insult to your high-functioning autistic loved one is absurd. But using this logic, if I post a video of an autistic person with significant challenges, can I say, F you, Trevor, for implying the person on my video is inferior to your child? Or can we agree talking about solving challenges like autism isn't smearing all autistic people as incapable? Now, Sneed, you said that no one was making that criticism, that everybody was just making the criticism that the treatments that were being offered by RFK were a lie. So what I'm going to do, Sneed McFeed, is I'm going to ban you from the channel now. You fucking sack of shit, dishonest, fucking pig, scumbag, asshole, fuckface. Okay? Thank you so much for being a member of this channel as far as now. You're gone. Fuck you. I'm glad we could do that. By the way, what happened to like, oh, I'm going to stop being so aggressive, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the cause of autism is. I would say there's a chance that certain medications, food, etc., could be causing rises. I think undoubtedly a lot of it is that we're calling things autism now that maybe we would have called mental retardation in the past or other sort of terms. I don't know, though. Do vaccines have something to do with it? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not just going to take it at face value. Oh, they certainly don't. Is it possible to treat some of the things of autism symptoms? Probably. Is it possible to cure at sort of a biological level? Things like different makeups of how the brain operates. Maybe, maybe not. I think right now it doesn't seem likely. But when I'm specifically saying that the segment I'm talking about here is the large swath of people I saw that were posting these videos saying, like, here's my kid with autism. How dare you imply that there's something wrong with them? That's what I was criticizing. And to have someone who's a regular listener tell me over and over, that's a lie. No one's saying that. How dare you? You're saying that we could just snap our fingers and cure autism. You're saying autism's fake. Go fuck yourself. The truth is, if you have a kid with autism that's doing very well, that's awesome. Some of the people I have worked with that have autism diagnosis or other developmental disability diagnosis are incredible people. Some of them are the nicest people I've ever met. Some of them are the most compassionate people I've ever met. Some of them have significant levels of intelligence beyond me in certain areas. I worked with a gentleman, we used to do what was called respite care. And respite care was, let's say that you're someone who takes care of a severely autistic person that needs round the clock care. So you don't really want to put your loved one in a full-time home healthcare setting, but you'd like to take some time off. Maybe you 1 or 2 weekends a month. You'd like to have some time off where you go do something, go on a trip, visit family, go on a vacation. That's what we would call respite care, where we step in and for a weekend or two, we help out. And I worked with a gentleman like that. He was older and he grew up in a house where the dad was a mechanic. And I learned this story that the dad would have this severely autistic child with him his entire life while he was working on cars in the garage. And as such, I've never seen someone who was as knowledgeable about older cars, not newer, but older cars. So like you'd be watching a TV show, he'd see a car and be like, oh, that's a 76 Chevy, blah, 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 blah. This is the engine that it had. And I'd be like, no kidding. Like, and he loved it. He loved talking. So I'd be like, all right, man, how about this one? And like, we'd try to find it out. He loved that. And it blew my mind. That is an intelligence that's like impressive. Numbers are a huge thing with so many of the people I worked with. I work with one gentleman. If he learns your birthday once, he will remember it the rest of his life. He might not remember your name, but once he connects, like, oh, you're that person, your birthday is blah, 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 and he'll know it. That's incredible. Mr. B, $20, thanks so much. Says, that was so effing cathartic. Normalize just telling online leftists to F off when you take their position seriously in a back and forth. And they move goalposts and lie to take advantage of your good faith debate tactics. Thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm not here saying, oh, autism means that you're mentally inferior and that you're dumb and you can't do anything. I'm not saying that. Even people I've worked with that require 24/7 care, there are certain aspects of them that there's extreme levels of intelligence on specific things. The intelligence that many of the people I've worked with were most likely to have the least of was what I would call social intelligence. Like, why can't I pee outside? Why can't I ask women their age? Why can't I stand like right in someone's face while I'm talking to them? Some of those questions are difficult to answer. Like, for example, why can't I ask a woman her age? Well, you can. That's my answer. And if they flip out, that's on them. If they can't see that there's clearly a situation here where they're going to get offended because some autistic guy just asked how old they are, that's on them, not on you, buddy. But those sorts of things, a lot of questions about a lot of, particularly because I'm dealing with adults, I don't know that they knew how to deal with people like this back in the day. So there'll be a lot of questions about sex or a lot of questions about body function. Like, why do I have to wear deodorant? Why do I stink? What are germs? Why do I get sick? Why can't I ask everyone for money? So, I mean, it ranges the gambit. And I'm not here, I don't know how to say this. I don't think I need to convince anyone here, but it is one of the greatest pleasures in my life that I get to work with people like that, because there's something deeply cathartic about actually making a difference in someone's life. And I have not found a job with a more direct connection to directly helping someone in their life than what I'm doing. I knew people that worked hospice care. That's how I feel about that job. We unfortunately have a culture that when people get older, we tend to forget them. They're put in a nursing home. They're put in some facility. We visit once in a while. And oftentimes, the most important people in our lives, in our dying moments, if we live to old age, are the caretakers that we have around us. Some nurse that works in the nursing home that's making $14 an hour. That's going to be the most important person in your life at some point as you lie dying in a nursing home. And it's sad, but from the perspective of that nurse, who should be paid more, in my opinion, but that's capitalism, I guess. She's making a difference. You know? That's why I do it. So I'll be damned if I'm going to let people come in here and be like, oh, you're saying autism's fake? Oh, what RFK said was like, kiss my ass. That's not what I'm saying. There are very few things in life other than like sticking up for my family and this that I would say that genuinely I think you could look at me and go, well, at least Rob gives, it's undeniable Rob gives a crap about that thing. So I'm not going to listen to someone come in here and pretend I don't. I have literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours. And at this point, where this past 3 weeks have probably been amongst the worst 3 I've had in this job area, and I'm not going to get into the details of what it looked like, but I assure you it's not been fun for me. Oops. Thank Jesus. Thanks for the $5. Says just showing some love to the channel. Keep up the good work, man. You're a blessing to those people. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Now, here's where, and I do have to end here in the next 15 minutes. Here's where maybe I thought I wouldn't get any pushback until this next part. Here's where I think I might have something that people view as controversial. I do agree that there is a spectrum of autism. I do agree with that. I wish that we had different words that were accepted so that we could be more precise in our language. So if I'm like, oh man, that guy's autistic, man, he could fix your computer like no one else, when I'm clearly referring to like some nerd that's like not very socially capable, but he's fantastic working on machines, as opposed to that person's autistic, they require 24/7 care. Those are vastly different things. And I wish that the word autism didn't mean those both. I don't know what word we would use. But that's the way things have shaken down. To me, autism is not a diagnosis, it's a catch-all. It's an explanation for different behaviors. It just basically, to me, at this point, means abnormal. But abnormal is not always bad. Like, it may be abnormal to memorize numbers. Very complicated way, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think, and here's the controversial part, and I know this is going to make someone mad that's watching this. I think people seek out autism diagnosis. I think in our culture, we're victimhood and cultural Marxist of oppressors versus oppressed. I think part of being different and being cool is being neurodivergent. I think it's trendy to say, oh, my kid's autistic. He's a savant. So, my goodness. I think it's trendy to go to your Instagram and go, my autism flared up again in my recent date. I don't care. If we're just using autism as different, abnormal, have at her. I don't care. And I'm not saying that that's what happens to every kid that has Asperger's, or I'm not saying that either. But what I'm saying is there seems to be some people getting lost in the shuffle in all of these conversations. And that's the people with severe autism. And I'm sorry, the idea that we have to whitewash it and pretend like it's not a really, really bad thing to have severe autism is bullshit. And it's a disservice to those people that have really, really required 24/7 care cases of autism. It's a disservice to them to pretend like, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is. It's a bad thing. That doesn't mean that they don't have value. That doesn't mean that they're not great at a very many things. But I'm not going to pretend that it's some sort of blessing. It's not. And I say that from a place of love. I do not disparage people that I have worked with. I'm not saying they're inferior as human beings. I'm not saying they're less in God's eyes. I'm not saying they're not worth compassion and investing in as humans, as a society. I'm not saying any of that. But the idea that we have to pretend it's a blessing, how dare anyone say there's anything wrong with autism, is bullshit. And it's a disservice to those people. In my opinion. I mean, we could say this. I had someone say, well, the problem is it's a disorder, not an illness. Okay. Then bipolar disorder. If I was to put if I was like, hey guys, today this show's dedicated to people with bipolar disorder. I'm working with this charity. So all donations today are going to go to this charity to work with people that have challenges with bipolar disorder. And so we're going to talk about that today and some of the challenges faced with bipolar disorder. Is someone going to comment, well, I have bipolar disorder and I function perfectly fine. How dare you? How dare you suggest that it's a problem to be solved? Okay. What about people that are born with genetic disorders where maybe they don't have fully functional arms and legs? It'd be rude to talk about the causes of that. Like, what was it, thalidomide or whatever back in the day that was causing deformities in babies? We can't talk about that because, well, my baby was born without arms and they're perfect. They're just great. How dare you say that it's a problem? How dare you want to look into that? It's absurd. There is a middle ground from treating people with disabilities like utter garbage, like you could just throw them away, and treating them like there's nothing wrong with them and we have to ignore reality and it's all a blessing. There's a middle ground between those. There's plenty of things you complain about RFK. That person that I booted from the channel wants to complain. RFK thinks that you'll ever be able to treat autism. That's a lie. Maybe that's right. RFK thinks vaccines partially could cause autism. That's garbage. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I'm dealing with the people, which is a thing that I've seen for 20 years of my life, or less, 18, of people that are like, autism's a blessing. It's a good thing. It's not. Aaron says, who traumatized you more, Adam or Jola? I really enjoyed the discussion with Adam. Jola, I don't know, he was okay, I guess. Better than that fatty guy. I understand that you lefties that want to hate watch me think every time I debate someone who could rub two sentences together that they crushed me in a debate. Rob got traumatized. I didn't see it that way. You're welcome to your opinion. Thanks so much for watching the channel. Speaking of which, so that's my spiel on autism. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So the other thing I was going to talk about today is our good friend Pisco, good friend of the channel. Um, he's like, I don't know, he's putting posts out. So like, the following conservatives are afraid to debate me on the deportation of this guy from El Salvador. JD Vance, Charlie Kirk, Joe Rogan. Yeah, man, I'm sure JD Vance is in the Oval Office as we speak, like, oh shit, this Pisco guy. Oh, he scares me so much. He has such a great debating style and capacity for the facts. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've never done debate bro shit. I do it. I try to be reasonable and reciprocate the energy that I'm giving to other people, that other people are giving me. But I'd be a liar if I said I don't do that. I also don't have a problem with Pisco when he debates me doing the debate bro shit. That's fine. But there's a difference, right? When you're trying to talk to someone like me or trying to talk to someone like JD Vance, or Pisco's constantly trying to get Dave Portnoy to talk to him, or Charlie Kirk, or Will Chamberlain. They're not going to respond to you being like, F you, you effing traitor, mother effing piece of effing blah, 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 you effing coward. Like, what is that? Now, I saw Pisco on Tim Pool with Good Logic. I thought that Tim interfered in that debate too much as he is wont to do, but I thought Good Logic was thoroughly handling Pisco on the facts of that debate before that point. Previous to that, I saw portions of Pisco debating actual justice warrior. I thought it was pathetic how Pisco right out of the gate, every other word out of his mouth was F. He F this, F that, F this, F that. He seemed super aggro. Okay. And then I've seen more. I missed his debate with Aircraft Sparky. I would like to see that. Maybe I'll watch it this week. But I saw that he was on, it's called Laid Back Law. It's a big law show that's got like ran by a left-wing lawyer and a right-wing lawyer, and they bring on lawyers. It's a bigger show. And I saw portions of it, and everyone in that, now I'm granting you that I'm guessing the audience of this show leans right-wing, but there's left-wingers on there, and to a T, every single comment is just like, I will never watch this show again if that guy's on. All he does is interrupt constantly, yell, scream, call people names, shout the F word. And that's the book on Pisco. Even when I debate him, I've told him this when we're like not arguing with each other. It's like one of the things that I'm not saying I never interrupt. And certainly people interrupt in different, but like this is me debating Pisco, right? This is how it goes. I'll turn my hat around when I'm Pisco. You ready? Here's me debating Pisco. Okay, first off, when it comes to sort of what Letitia James was doing here, I think it was clearly biased. That's not true. Okay, because what she ended up doing is the first thing she does is say that like we're going to go after like, you know, Donald Trump. That's not true. And what's not true? Well, blah, 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 and fucking blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. But what I was saying is, if you'd let me finish my point, that I think that's not true. And it's like, that's it. Like, you can't even get in, like, there's interrupting. And I don't mind if, like, that happens once in a while, but that's, like, constantly with him. Like, constantly. And again, I'm not even really complaining because I'm me. And it's like, I'm not going to say I've never done that. But, like, I liken it to, like, this. Like, when I'm debating, like, with Pisco, or I'm debating with, like, I don't know, insert any of these people. It's one step up from you and your buddies arguing with each other at the bar. Once you're on a bigger show, or if you're doing an in real life event, the bar for professionalism rises a little. Maybe cut back on the swears a little when you're doing an event in real life. Maybe let the other person finish their point a little more. If you're on a show and you're talking to people that are like, honest to goodness, like professional lawyers that are like arguing these things in front of courts, you're arguing with members of the administration, you're arguing with, maybe you tone that stuff down a little. You're trying to talk to people that are multi-millionaires, that are like huge audiences like Dave Portnoy. You're trying to chum them in to have a conversation with you. Maybe you cut back on calling them an effing moron, coward, blah, blah, blah. Maybe. Or maybe you just keep doing the bad Destiny impression. And the sad part is, I think Pisco's a better debater than Destiny. I do. I don't know if part of Pisco's personality is just being like Destiny and being uber confrontational, and maybe that's who he is. Or maybe that's the dude he looks up to, and he sees that helped Destiny build an audience, so he thinks that's what I'm going to do too. So then he was going after Will Chamberlain, who's a lawyer on X, who's got a bigger following, and some other folks. They're cowards. They won't debate me. And Will Chamberlain, I feel law of legal defense was like, Pisco said something to him, and law of legal defense is like, he's a bigger streamer or a bigger poster on X, was like, okay, man, if you have proof, go ahead and post it. And Pisco's like, well, how about we do a Spaces? And that dude's like, yeah, I don't have time for that. If you got an argument, make it here and I'll respond. Well, why don't we have a conversation? Yeah, man, I don't have time for that. And then finally the dude was like, okay, you don't have an argument. Then and Pisco's like, you're running from me. And it's like, yeah, that might apply to me or someone that's on a similar level of Pisco as far as like audience size streaming. But like, this isn't even a guy that's like a streamer. This is more of a guy that's like posting on X. And a lot of these lawyers that are weighing in, many of them aren't streamers. And so like when you're like, oh, you're a coward if you won't come on my stream. And they're like, well, no, I'm willing to talk to you now. So then with Will Chamberlain, Will was like, I'm not just going to debate some nobody. You donate $10,000 to Wounded Warrior. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And so Destiny, Pisco's, I'm disassociating from, but he's still my chummer. Destiny was like, I'll pay the $10,000. Will Chamberlain's like, great, let's do it. Then, of course, Tim Pool hops in and is like, you can do it in my show. Hey, Will Chamberlain, you're making a big... I have nothing against Tim Pool. I like Tim. He's had me on the show. But if you're trying to have a serious discussion, I wouldn't do it on Tim's show. Just saying. Because Tim's going to be a debater. He's not going to be a moderator. Tim's going to talk 60% more than you do. And if you're a lawyer that thinks, listen, Tim, why don't you sit this one out? I think I have the legal case better than you. You're going to be very disappointed because Tim's going to talk over you and you're going to get lumped in with Tim's argument. So no doubt, Pisco's jumping at the opportunity. Yes, let's do it on Tim Pool's show. Instead, it should be a venue where both of them talk and the moderator chooses to not interject almost at all, except to keep things on track and stop people from grotesque interruptions. That would be my preference, but what do I care? Nonetheless, I put the offer out there to Pisco that if Destiny's willing to donate $10,000 to me for my lawnmower fund, I will happily debate Pisco on the topic of his choosing. Works for me. Something tells me that won't be coming. But it's nice to have big money backers, am I right? What's up, Stank Jesus, for $2? Tim, I'll make all the points for the debate pool. Yeah. I like Tim. Now, listen. Again, I'll say this about Tim. Tim's built up an audience the size of which I'll never even remotely approach. He's entertaining. He made his bones getting out there on the field, going to Antifa rallies Antifa was out. So I have no qualms about that. And it's Tim's show. He could run it however he wants. Everybody has a different moderation style. I personally, as a moderator, and when I debate, what I want to see in a moderator, prefer the style where the moderator stays out of it as much as possible. To me, a good moderator is like a good referee. You should barely notice them. Couple key moments, they come in to redirect somewhere, that's it. But when I'm debating, when I'm moderating, or where I'm watching a debate, my personal preference is I don't want to really hear from the moderator all that much. Now, some people as a moderator, they let the debate go on for a couple hours, and then after a couple hours, they're like, well, I have some questions. That's fine. That's far more egregious than maybe Tim doesn't feel that culture wars him moderating. Yeah, watch Wick, then avoid moderating like him. Right, that's good advice. EOD probably would be a good moderator. Do I think Tim ruined the Pisco Good Logic debate? Yes, I do. I didn't get to see all of the Lactoid Wick debate, but the 30 minutes I saw was Lactoid talking about 3 minutes, Wick talking about 14 minutes, and the other 13 minutes going to Tim. Same thing. I'm like, I would like to hear Lactoid. The other thing is, people don't realize this, but perceptually, that's bad for the person whose side Tim's on. And I don't even mean because Tim's making bad arguments. Perceptually, what that looks like is, oh, it took two people, Tim Pool and Good Logic, to try to argue against Pisco. That's why, perceptually, I never minded when it's like me versus 7 people on a panel, because I'm going to win anyways, 95% of the time. And it just makes them look weak. Like it took 7 of them to debate me. So, all right. Well, that's going to be the show for today. I'm going to get downstairs. I got a little chippy tonight. Sorry about that. I'm trying to cut back on the swears. And I failed on that tonight. So sorry about that. But anyways, if you haven't given the channel a like or given this episode a like, please do so. I'm going to try to stream tomorrow evening. My work situation is so up in the air right now. I just have no clue. In a minimum Wednesday, I should be streaming. I should officially be home for Good Wednesday. Supposedly, we'll see if this dude reaches out to me. Some guy who's a Destiny wannabe reached out to me that he was going to make Destiny's arguments for him on a criticism I have of Destiny on X, where Destiny's calling Asmongold fascist adjacent. And I make the point, Destiny's routinely said that people that he disagrees with on this space should be censored. He wanted to kick Trump off the ballot. He said Trump supporters are F around, find out if they're shot at his rallies. He said violence is the other side of the coin to voting when it came to the Black Lives Matter rallies. He said that the worst thing that could have happened was that bullet missing Trump. So for him to then engage in all that behavior and criticize someone else as fascist adjacent is laughable. And this guy said, I'll make all Destiny's arguments for him, and I don't even use ChatGPT. This is what he said. I said, okay, cool. You come on, Destiny wannabe, you make his arguments for me. And then his response to me was, well, let's get a topic nailed down, because I've seen you debate and you'll jump around. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. To which I responded, the topic's going to be that you just said, when I pointed out everything in that post, that you could make all of Destiny's arguments on those things. That'll be the topic. You'll make Destiny's argument. But as a Destiny wannabe, I'm quite certain you're very familiar with drinking from fire hoses. So always nice to see that caliber of people. So supposedly that person's going to reach out, and we're going to do a discussion Wednesday where a Destiny wannabe is going to come on and get smacked around and defend how Destiny has any leg to call people fascist adjacent and criticize them for that. So, all right. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I will see you all hopefully tomorrow. If not, we'll see you for sure Wednesday. Well, I can't say for sure. 95% certainty we'll see you Wednesday, but anything could come up, I guess. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk soon. As always, have a good one.